we get really good at what we practice. And if we practice negative self-talk, boy, can we get really good at it.
Mm.
If we really intentionally practice speaking to ourselves, like we would our children, or we would our best friend, we would be, zooming pretty high and feeling pretty good about ourselves.
Hello, and welcome to Living Her Legacy, a podcast that celebrates and serves mamas who are choosing to live their best lives after starting their family. I'm your host, Jill Sutton, and thank you so much for joining today. As always, follow along on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Jill G. Sutton or at Living Her Legacy Podcast. I love connecting there because we can have more of a two-way conversation. You can also find the YouTube channel Living Her Legacy up, and it is a little bit behind this audio podcast, but you can find the episodes going up there hopefully more regularly. And that's kind of fun to be able to watch just the video of it, to see our conversation kind of like firsthand as if you're in the room with us. So I definitely encourage you guys to go check that out. We are wrapping up Depression Awareness Month. It is October, Depression Awareness Month, and like I promised, we have a clinical therapist on that is going to kind of capstone our month. Now, I just want to preface this episode by saying that we do talk about sensitive topics such as suicide or attempting suicide, depression, and some other things that may be triggering. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of the content before you continue listening. If that is something that you are sensitive to, I want you to fully know what is coming up on this episode. On the podcast today, we have Kayla Scheanon. She is a licensed therapist who works hand in hand with many people who suffer from depression. She has so many takeaways during this episode on things that we can practically do in our lives right now. Even if we're not someone who has had a clinical diagnosis of depression, these are things that we can all do. I hope you guys enjoy. Hello, Kayla. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Hi, thank you for having me on. I'm doing really well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good this morning. I'm so excited that we were able to squeeze this in because I feel like this is going to add a lot of value to the month of October being Depression Awareness Month. Why don't you get started just telling me maybe a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you're doing now?
Okay, so my name is Kayla Scheanon. I'm a licensed therapist in Pennsylvania. I've actually had my practice about 15 years now, which makes me feel old, but I still feel young, at heart. So, about 15 years I've been in private practice. I'm from Ohio. So, actually, where I live and where I work is right across the border. So, I live in Ohio and I work in Pennsylvania. I absolutely love what I do. I work with adults with depression, anxiety. I do couples counseling, and I really enjoy working with teenagers and adolescents as well. Um, and I enjoy working with people who have had their power taken from them at some point, and they are like just needing some support in getting their power back.
That's a good run right there.
Yeah, it's something that like I would choose again and again and again if I had more lifetimes. I can't say enough about how mental health is a super rewarding field because we get to work on ourselves and we get to support and help other people in that process too. So it's it's been wonderful.
Let's talk a little bit about what made you get into therapy in the first place.
Okay, so this is kind of an interesting story, and I really think it's important to tell. So, I believe I was in seventh grade. My mom actually, she suffered from depression and PTSD her whole life, and she was very depressed while I was growing up. So, when I was in seventh grade, she pretty severely attempted suicide, and we were lucky that she made it through. It was very touch and go, but she made it through. And after that, all of my family members ended up having individual therapists. So there I was, like a month after that, very scary,
Mm.
tragic event. And I was sitting with a therapist for the first time in my life. And she was just this beautiful, classy, loving, nurturing woman. And she was exactly what I needed at that time in my life. And I remember looking at her and I said to her, "So, this is what you do every day?" And I usually get choked up when I talk about it because I just remember how much she was what I needed at that time and
Mm.
how she was able to teach me skills even as a seventh grader, about my own personal wellness being in my own hands and being able to work on that. So that is, I just, in that moment, I said, I want to do and be essentially that woman, and that really never changed like that. And there we go, and then that was my plan. And that's how we got to where I'm at today.
Wow. That's amazing. That's something similar to me. I'm a physical therapist though, but it was kind of the same situation. It was like a junior high type setting. I had a girlfriend, tear a rotator cuff, dislocated her shoulder, had to go through surgery, rehab, and she was my best friend. So like I went to all her rehab and I was like, I want to do this, but isn't it crazy how like the impression that
Wow.
someone can make at such a young age?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And when we see that what they're doing is helping us, or like in your story, your friend, it's just that moment it clicks inside of
Mm,
us that, yeah, that's what I want to do.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about depression because that is one of the things that a lot of people come to you for. Can you just
Mhm.
kind of give us how it maybe presents in people or, because it's not always just
Oh,
sad, it can be anxiety and things like that. And I think people really need to know a little bit more about how depression can present.
and like that's such an important thing to talk about, and I'm so glad you brought that up first. So, oftentimes what I see, especially in like busy moms or busy
Mm,
people, is like this super heavy feeling. So people will come in and say, I don't know what it is, but I know before I even open my eyes in the morning, I just feel heavy.
mm,
And you can just like whenever you say that, you can just like almost feel it, especially if you've ever had a episode of major depression in your life, what that feeling is. So, and I think being a clinician and being somebody who, I had it in my family, and then to have had my own personal episodes of depression in my life, it kind of helps,
mhm,
in a weird way, knowing, okay, I know what that is, right? So people will say, I just feel heavy. It's very hard energetically to get through my day. I don't have the bandwidth to get through my day like maybe I did at another point in my life or a couple years ago or something like that. So some people will be having trouble eating. They'll be having trouble like dragging their body around, like to take a shower, to do those simple self-care things for ourselves can be lacking or very much harder to do. So there's only like a subset of us that really experience depression in a way that's like very sad thoughts. Sometimes it truly is more of the energy level, trouble sleeping, like all of a sudden they're just not getting the rest. Some people it will manifest as they're sleeping 14 hours a day and they know that's not normal for them. So all of these different physical signs you can look for in yourself, or like in a loved one. I think those are really important to think about.
does it ever manifest as like anger or like resentment or
Oh,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like kind of like
Yeah.
yeah.
Irritability. Like, yeah.
Mm,
So having more irritability than normal for sure. And I think if you have a partner that you see that more coming at you, you can always say to your partner, hey, I've noticed you've been a little bit more irritable with me lately. I'm not upset with you. I'm just concerned about how you're feeling.
mm,
Um, so something I'll say to people is like, it's okay to say to somebody, how are you doing in your inner world? How are you? Just to have check-ins. And I think it's important we do that with anybody. Like with the person who just handed me my coffee at McDonald's, like, how are you really doing? You know, I think we need to ask each other that more. The other way it can manifest is if you notice, wow, like my confidence is really taking a hit right now. Like I don't have that self-worth like I used to. I'm noticing more negative thinking about myself or about how I'm seeing the world. The lenses in which I'm viewing the world seem to be a little darker, than I usually am.
mm,
Um, which, so something that can help people is to be an observer of our thoughts.
Mm.
It's almost like taking that step back from the you that's running around doing everything every day, taking that step back and saying, let me like kind of look at what the background noise of my thinking is, because usually whatever is playing on that cassette tape, I used to have cassette tapes, whatever is playing on that in our minds is going to be the driver, like the engine of our feeling. So if we're
Mhm.
feeling depressed or we're feeling more anxious, what's really driving that is very important to be able to take a look at.
That I love that you said that because I've recently been kind of reevaluating my self-talk
Mhm.
and realizing that it has been very negative for so long. And I think a lot of women do. We beat ourselves up, whether it's physically or I forgot to send the kid with their water bottle to school. Like it's my fault. It's like we kind of are always kind of beating ourselves up. And it's really, you have to be really intentional about making
Yeah.
that switch and thinking through what you actually are saying to yourself and then replacing those statements, right, with something positive, having a morning mantra or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, intentional is like my word of the year this year. I'm like super into it. A couple weeks ago, I had a intentional self-care night at my office for my clients and friends that were able to come in person. So it was an intentional bath shower. So if you think about the five senses, I created like a music playlist. We had candles for the scent and the smell, the playlist for hearing, feeling. I had loofahs and different things like that. Taste. I got some yogi tea for everybody to choose from. So all different kinds of soaps and things, so that instead of just getting in the shower and getting out, like so many of us do, how do I walk into my bathroom and say, you know what? I'm going to love on myself in this very simple shower. Throw one of these shower steamers in that smells good and relaxes me. Turn on some music that feels like a big hug for me, and really create a special experience out of your 5 minutes.
Hmm.
That can really help us if we do that intentionally. And same thing with our thinking, like you and I are talking about. And I can even see when you said that you were evaluating your self talk and your eyes looked, kind of down, because
Mm.
that your self talk hasn't been very nice to yourself
Hmm.
lately.
Right. Right.
So intentionally saying, I say a lot, we get really good at what we practice. And if we practice negative self-talk, boy, can we get really good at it, which is like an oxymoron, right? But
Mm.
if we really intentionally practice speaking to ourselves, like we would our children, or we would our best friend, we would be, zooming pretty high and feeling pretty good about ourselves for the most part, other than normal dips in mood that we all are going to have.
Hmm. Hmm. I love too how simple it is to do something like that, like playing some music. We all have music accessible, right? It's like not that
Yeah.
hard to throw on a favorite song while you're in the shower. Or,
Mhm.
one thing I might do sometimes is either listen to a podcast or a book on, audiobook while I'm in the shower. It might only be those few minutes, but it's something that I get to do for myself. I love like the shower steamer or a bath bomb or whatever. Sometimes I just stick it in the floor of the shower. I don't even put it in a bath, but just to have that
Yeah.
extra scent, it doesn't take long. And as an overwhelmed mom, we don't want things to take long. We want it to be something that can be quick, but we can take care of ourselves because it is so important.
Mhm, mhm. And it's really important too, if you have any male listeners, which I do, same thing. We can do the same thing obviously for them too, and they should with intention, because they're out there doing the same things that we are, working super hard and need to focus on intentionally treating themselves well, talking to themselves well, taking care of themselves.
Mm, those are some really good tips too. You talked about like taking your power back. Talk about that for me if you can.
Sure. So if you think about it, our power can be taken from us, or we can give it away in any sense. So A very simple situation could be if you're in a workplace where you have a boss or a manager that, you know, they really talk down to you, and that doesn't feel good. And so all of a sudden you're feeling small in your workplace. So it can be like that,
Mhm.
which is simple and very important. We spend so many hours in our workplace, so that's like a really big deal. So it can be like that, or it can be, the mom or the dad who has a partner that, speaks to them in ways like you never do anything right. And really puts them down. And we can say a lot of mean other things. Certainly, if somebody is swearing at you, like that's pretty clear that that's not
Mhm.
okay. But then it can go to even deeper levels of financial abuse, and your money is taken from you before you even get it, and you're not able to take care of the bills and things, and you're in debt because of someone. Or, they are mentally coercing you into staying in a situation that is not healthy for you. So, and then of course, physical abuse and all those different kinds of abuse. October is also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So
Mm.
that's like a really big month, I think, for people. So to kind of like cross like our topics too today, there are people who will be like think that they're very depressed only purely because of depression, let's say. But when I really get to talking with them, it's they don't have their power in their
Mm.
life at all. And so that depression has developed secondarily to they're in an abuse environment, right? And if we clear up the abuse environment and we give them what they need to be able to take their power back, oftentimes the depression will start to dissipate. And it's a
Mm.
pretty cool thing to see. So, in my own life, I had my power taken from me. I was able to get my power back utilizing like a holistic approach of things that just fell into place. So, I ended up with a really amazing landlord. I That helped me take my power back. I ended up doing self-defense lessons, training under somebody absolutely amazing, helped me connect my physical strength in taking myself back, taking my power back, and my mental mindset of getting my power back with self defense. I had a wonderful coach that she had risen from her own control situation. So after I was out of my situation, I thought everybody should have access to all of these things, period. End of story. And it can be very hard to access those things if you are in a control situation, because a lot of times your every movement is being tracked. And sometimes people even have trackers on their cell phones or their
Mm.
cars. So I ended up in working with a software like development company. I have a secret app, and I call it Underground Moves. And on it, anybody who has it has access to me as a therapist who's experienced taking their power back. They have access to a peer coach who is absolutely wonderful, to a trauma release yoga specialist who is the bomb. And she's
Mm.
also
Wow.
risen from her own control situation, self defense. So they can have live self defense or in person, depending on where they're at, training so that you know what to do if you're backed into a corner and how to protect yourself and or your children. Housing advocacy, because like sometimes you're not able to go view a house or an apartment to rent, and you're not able to call those people. So having a housing advocate for you to do that underground work um, is really helpful too. So that's like kind of my side project, which I'm super duper duper passionate about. And I also have some housing with some teammates of mine that we've put a couple people in the last couple years and even this week into housing that were leaving their situations and felt like they were ready to. So I think that if you're somebody who is in a control situation, it's really important for you or for them to know that there are people out here who not only are getting out, but who are saying, I don't want anybody to ever feel like they don't have
Mm.
access to all of the things that can help them behind the scenes, set them up for success, and for permanently ending the cycle of control in their life.
That is absolutely amazing. Like that is, you've ticked all the boxes as far as what someone would need in that situation. And that's wonderful. So if someone were in a situation like that, they can download the app and then what is it just like not is it not traceable on the phone? I just don't understand how it's like
Yeah.
an underground. Yeah.
So it's not traceable. So the web, they can message, like if anybody needs to message me, my handle on Instagram is the self partnered therapist. They can message me and I can steer them in the right direction
Mhm.
for it. In about a month, there's going to be a website live, undergroundmoves.com. And through that website, it will guide you if you're an employer who wants to buy access to the app for your employees. Um, that is a wonderful and admirable thing. That will be an option on there. And then I will train the HR and the companies how to support their employees with accessing the app. There will be an option for individual people like you and me if we went on there and we were able to get our own, like, kind of like month of it or year of it. There'll be a way to click it and then it'll explain to them how to download the app and use it. But yes, it's not traceable on the phone. It would not be somebody anybody would know what it was. And it logs out, very quickly, much like the National Domestic Violence .org. You can chat with people on there for support. It's much like that, where it will disconnect the survivor if they stop using the program, and that's also non-traceable. This app is too. It's just that you have more services in your
Mm,
pocket, and they're all peers. They're all people who have been through it and are on the other side of it, and who can really support.
that's amazing. Wow.
Thank you for asking about it. It's just something I feel so passionate about, and I really think that in our society, if we take a step back and we look at, like, what's causing, like, what is driving our anxiety, what's driving our depression, what's zapping our energy, sometimes the answer might be, not always, but it might be, you're in a power and control dynamic, and if you just had help understanding what's healthy and what's not healthy and how to get to healthy, maybe that would clear up some of the other mental health stuff.
Mm, yeah. I do feel like, I mean, we've had a much bigger push in the States, at least for mental health awareness. It seems like it's a little bit more everywhere. What are your thoughts on that? That's obviously like encouraging.
Yeah, yeah, I have noticed an increase in that too, and, like, so much needed if you think about, unfortunately, like, the societal level of shootings and things like that. So, I think when those big things happen, we see, a good response, right? But it's up to us. Like, it's up to all of us in society as a whole to check on each other. Like I mentioned, the person at McDonald's this morning, it's up to us to check on each other. I don't care
Hmm.
what your relationship is with other people. And to say, like, hey, I know of these things if you ever need help, or I've been in therapy. There's nothing wrong with it. If you ever need it, here's a name,
Mm,
or here's a
hmm.
way to
Hmm.
go about it, so that we can keep decreasing stigma and not just respond to it when we have a major event in society, but as a whole to just really prioritize mental health and wellness across the board. And I think, like, podcasts, like your podcast here, amazing, like, phenomenal. Like you said, you're in physical therapy and you're doing podcasts with mental health and talking about it. That is so admirable and awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean it plays such a role too physically in the body. I see it physically a lot of
Mhm.
times, and I think what's nice is sometimes in the medical community, there is a lot of collaboration where they do, refer out to the specialist that they need to. And you can kind of screen for these other things that might be a little outside your scope, right? Like this is a little bit outside my scope. Let's get you to a provider that can really help you with these thoughts or, the depression that I can feel in your body.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is so neat and so cool. So when you find somebody who you think there's depression manifesting in, and you're seeing it with them physically, you'll really recognize that and say, let's get you some help or some providers. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
oftentimes, we're trying to, just like you guys, taking a really thorough history,
Mhm,
and it might come out, not at that first appointment because you haven't really built that rapport yet, but things kind of come out, you're pretty physical therapy is pretty intimate, your hands on the body, you're talking through a lot of stuff, and it can trigger a lot of different responses. And so yeah, there's
mhm,
definitely times where you can see like this is something that needs to be addressed by somebody else for sure.
mhm. That is so neat. I love that. We're all in this together. We're all out here bumping around, trying to understand ourselves, trying to see like where we kind of jive with other people and fit while becoming our own people. So why not evolve together?
Is there anything that you would recommend as like a mindset practice or something that like an activity someone can do that would help them start this process of either talking positive or, just something that would get them going?
hmm So for your regular person, I think if you can incorporate any kind of self-reflection into your life or into your day, that's kind of the first place to start. So if you're busy, busy, busy in the morning, before you even get out of bed, I think it's a good idea to say, okay, let me set some intentions for my day
Mm,
right now. Let
mhm,
me decide where my thoughts are going to go today. Let me really direct that thinking because that's a really good place to start, especially if you're realizing you're having some depression and you're needing to really
mm,
start choosing your thinking. And then book ending. So that would be if you think of a bookend, and the books are in the middle, there's a beginning and an end. Doing that in the morning is like starting your day off centered and balanced. Also, doing that in the evening is that other part of the bookend. And in the in between is like your life of your day. So at the end of your day, if you can sit down and you can say, how did I do on my intentions today? Was I able to kind of keep up with those? Do I need to kind of tweak that for tomorrow? That's a good time to pat yourself on the back for anything small that you were able to
mm,
do, that you did do, because I think sometimes we miss the small things that we need to
mhm,
champion ourselves on. So setting your intentions out loud verbally, if people like to journal or jot things down, they could do that in a journal. And you don't have to write too much more other than those things unless you do really like to write. Other ways to bookend your day would be doing like a teeny tiny yoga practice in the beginning and an evening wind down little yoga practice at night. And it can even be stretching, if you
mhm,
it just
mhm,
to incorporate you being like in physical therapy, incorporating that mind body and just kind of stretching and moving your body around and getting it connected with your thoughts and your feelings. That's kind of a really good day to do that. I do have an idea to share or something that I've noticed that's been very helpful for me
sure.
throughout life. So when I had gotten my bachelor's degree in psychology, I had probably one of my most favorite jobs of my life when I first came out of undergrad, which was I was a blended case manager for people with what we called at that time chronic mental illness. So these are people that they had been in state hospitals for mental health and they were living in the community and they needed a blended case manager to come and check in on them and see how they were doing, see if they were able to have access to care and things like that. So that was one of my favorite jobs. And during that time, there was a movement at that time called the WRAP plan, Wellness Recovery Action Planning. And I believe it's still around today. If people want to look it up, it's wonderful.
Mm,
It was created, Mary Ellen Copeland is a lady who created it. And she would visit her mom in the mental health hospital, and her dad would say, is there anything else we can do to support my mom when she comes out? And one day, a doctor said to them, well, you could kind of make a plan to say, this is what she looks like when she's well. And these are kind of the signs that show when she's starting to slip. And this is what she looks like when she's not well. So this woman took that information, created it into a whole program to wrap people in a
mm,
plan for
mm,
themselves. So I learned that through that job, really took it into my own life and said, we don't have to be ill on the level of going into a mental health hospital to use this idea of wrapping ourselves with a plan. We can do that as moms, dads,
Mm,
employees. We can wrap ourselves in a mental wellness plan. So, thinking about me today, what do I look like when I'm feeling well? Well, I'm getting up pretty easily. I'm hopping out of bed for me, because I'm a morning person.
yeah.
I'm turning on music. I'm dancing. Okay. So making a big list of those for yourselves. And then what do I look like when things are kind of sort of starting to go toward depression land? Well, I am slower to getting up out of bed. So that's what that looks like. I forget that I can even turn on music,
Hmm.
right? So I'm not picking out my outfits. I'm just throwing on anything at that point, versus intentionally choosing things that I feel good in. So I try to stay pretty present and current on that and looking at where I'm at because you can adjust accordingly. If you realize you're in things are breaking down for me land, well, then there are things that we can identify that can kind of bump us back up into feeling good. But if we wait until we're all the way to I'm broke, things are broken down, like I am at a point
Mm,
where I'm not doing any of the things that are healthy for me. We can still come back from that too, but it's probably going to take more heavy lifting to get ourselves up to well.
mm, hmm,
Does
hmm.
that make sense?
What that's an amazing tool. And I love that because I feel like that is helpful to open up discussion between your partner, the people that are close around you, because you can paint such a clear picture. Just like you said, I'm getting out of bed, I'm picking out my clothes, I'm putting on, hair and makeup in the mornings versus, yeah, just rolling out of bed. Now, some days are like that, right? Some days are like that. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's, you're going down the slippery slope or anything, but I think tuning into those clues about yourself and about your mood. I know one thing for me, I can tell when I'm in a good headspace. I can turn most things into a positive situation, right? When the kids are, getting, fighting with each other or, whatever it is, not listening, I can keep it positive. But when I'm at my edge, that's when I'm like, enough. Like I can't take it. You can kind of tell you're short, you're irritable. Like it's
Yes.
harder to keep up that kind of like, I don't know, just like that friendly atmosphere in the house
Yeah.
because you can tell that you're just at a low.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think you would do this? Like you would incorporate like this idea into your life?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think,
Awesome.
especially thinking between like my spouse and I, like there are times, when we are irritated at each other, and it's like, doesn't matter what he says, I'm going to take it as
Mhm.
something that he's trying to, he's trying
Yeah.
to get me upset or whatever. But you can tell when
Yeah.
you're at that state. And I think if we both had be able to
Uh-huh.
communicate that, like, hey, here we
Mhm.
are.
It really takes a lot of self-reflection to even understand where we're at personally, but then to understand at where our partner has evolved to, and
Hmm.
then where has the relationship at its own separate organism is how I consider it in terms of marital and couples therapy is okay, how do we nurture and nourish this creature that is our marriage and really take care of it,
Mm,
because we've both evolved in
yeah.
that time, you know.
And you think about like anytime you have a life change is really a good time to have a third party to talk to about it
Yeah.
because it's so much of your life changing.
Right.
Baby being born, the loss of somebody, a house move, a career change, like all of these things play a big
Mhm.
role on our mental health.
They do. They do. One thing for listeners that I think is really important from my perspective as a therapist is make sure you're going to a therapist who regularly has their own therapy or their own coaching or like some way of they are allowing themselves to evolve too.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think that's really, really important because why would we ever go to somebody who hasn't been through their own stuff? isn't working on their own stuff, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really, that they see the importance of self-reflection and therapy in their own lives. I think it's really, really important. And I think it's an okay question to ask your therapist. It's okay to check in with your therapist on that. Like, are you someone who believes in self-development and evolving and mental wellness? How do you keep working on your mental wellness? And if they can't answer that, like, maybe they'll start, or, maybe you end up kind of like interviewing other therapists too, because
Hmm. Hmm.
not everybody's going to be the right fit at any particular time for any particular person.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because that's something I say all the time is find the one that you drive with. I mean, you really have to, if you're going to be spending that much time with them and you're going to be really disclosing a lot of information with them, you want somebody that you feel comfortable with for sure. And
Mhm.
sometimes it takes, one, two, or three to get to where you want to be.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
well, Kayla, I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be living in your legacy?
Oh, I love that question. So, wow, I think it means to be rising up from anything that you're trying to grow through, because we grow through what we go through. So I think it means to be like kind of breaking through those things that are our own self development things to come through, and then to be authentically living that in my daily life. Which, if you look at my Instagram, like that's pretty much my daily life. My daughter and I, and how we're living and how we're trying to incorporate just authentic living
Mm.
in all of our moments, and
Hmm.
embracing all of it, embracing joy, embracing hard times, embracing growth, and just truly like living it every day authentically.
Mm. Speaking of that, where can people find you?
So I would say the easiest way is probably to message me on Instagram. I always message back. So the self-partnered therapist is my handle. I have a couple different websites. I do have a link tree. If you click on the link tree on my Instagram, you'll see like different ways to get a hold of me too. As far as I didn't tell you, the self-partnered therapist handle name, I have coaching that I do with people who are going through kind of an identity shift in their life. And they're needing to really be the best partner for themselves for a little bit and explore who they are. That's what the self partnered therapist is. So it's really coaching along with
Mm.
therapy during that process. So there is a website for that through the link tree that people can do the coaching with me as well.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you so, so much for being on today and sharing your time.
Of course, I really appreciate you having me on, and I love what you're doing and how you're encouraging people to live authentically.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
If there's any of your listeners, if they just identify themselves as your listener, I
Mhm.
will I will work with them, at any kind of cost that would be affordable to them. So I'm
Okay.
super flexible with people, and I would love to hear from your listeners if they contact me,
Yeah.
that would be wonderful.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I'll have them put in like either something legacy or something like that when they reach out to you. Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay. Kayla, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yes, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining today. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation between Kayla and I. Like I said before, there were so many takeaways. I really love that wrap concept of being able to identify, you know, who you look like when you're functioning optimally, who you look like when you're slipping, and who you look like when you're not functioning great. And I really feel like even if you don't have that clinical diagnosis of depression, these things are great tools to use throughout your day. You can kind of see when you're sliding into a funk. This would really help open up conversation between you and a significant other or your partner. I really feel like this helps. And just like she was saying, how we need to kind of step up and in society be able to say, how are you doing really? And I think so many of us are kind of afraid of this conversation because maybe we don't put in the time to really have these conversations with others. But these are the important conversations. And I really feel like community is something that we all need. Kayla mentioned we're all just human beings, just kind of bumping around and trying to figure out how to better ourselves, how to grow ourselves, how to be the best we can be. And nobody's got it down perfect, right? We're all just trying to figure it out together. I want to just encourage you to take those few moments, reach out, maybe start with somebody that's closer to you. Maybe it doesn't have to be the store clerk or somebody that you don't know, but reach out to a family member and just say, how are you doing really? Like, let's talk about it. Let's make this more of a common conversation and really build on our community. If you guys are seeking help at all, if you feel inspired to just reach out to a therapist, Kayla has offered her services. Basically, she said, mention living her legacy and she will work something out with you, whether it's something that is going to be a payment plan or a reduced rate, but definitely mention the Living Her Legacy podcast on your intake form if you want to speak with her. And she will do what she can do to provide the services that you need. She wants, obviously, no one to go untreated and no one to go on this journey alone. She has tons of resources and would love to hook you up. So mention Living Her Legacy podcast. That would be amazing. Also, if you don't want to do a virtual event and you're looking for somebody live, but you're not in her area, go on Psychology Today, type in your zip code, and find a therapist that is close to you, that you can meet with, that you jive with, that you get along with, that you really feel like you can move mountains with, right? You can really get some momentum going and change some of these negative thought patterns that we have. All right, I've rambled on long enough. I love you guys. I'll talk with you later. See you next week.